Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly Sanchez, and I'm going to be talking about the sexual harassment and abuse that occurs in women's gymnastics. The issue of sexual harassment and abuse in women's gymnastics became a focal point for mainstream media after Dr. Lawrence Nasser, a sports physician for the USA Women's Olympic Gymnastics team, was arrested for having abused over 150 young female athletes. The victims themselves were the first to bring attention to this issue in women's sports. Rachel Den Hollander was the first gymnast to publicly accuse Nasser of abuse. In addition, the Indianapolis Star published an expose in September of 2016 calling out how the USA Gymnastics team had neglected and turned a blind eye to its athletes that had endured sexual abuse. Following Den Hollander's allegations and Indy Star's article, hundreds of victimized women and children gained the courage to speak out about their abuse at the hands of Dr. Nasser. Since then, the issue has gained a lot of support from movements such as the #MeToo movement, organizations like Safe Sport, and celebrities like Chrissy Teigen, who offered to pay gymnast Michaela Maroney's fines for violating her non-disclosure agreement in order to speak out. The issue has long existed and been ignored, but after pressure from the public and the media, the issue became federal as an investigation of the abuse was led by the FBI. Dr. Nasser was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree criminal sexual abuse on November 22nd of 2016, and he was arrested on December 16th for possession of child pornography. Nasser was further prosecuted in a case that was funded by the U.S. Office of Violence Against Women, and was ultimately charged with multiple counts of felony criminal sexual misconduct in the first degree, and sentenced to a maximum of 175 years in federal prison. Despite being the poster child for the sexual harassment and abuse that occurs in women's gymnastics, there's unfortunately so much more to this issue than just the famous case involving the USA Women's Gymnastics team. Sex abuse allegations are no stranger to any sport, regardless of age, gender orientation, culture, or race. But despite that, according to research reported on by a Canadian professor featured in the National Library of Medicine, it's often younger women that are the largest target for sexual violence in sports, in terms of gender differences. In addition to this, women receive a lot of indirect sexual harassment through social media. In a study conducted by World Athletics, 240,000 tweets were analyzed during the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games. An AI language processor analyzed the tweets for indications of abuse. It was found that 87% of all abusive posts were directed towards female athletes. Not only does this issue involve gender disparities, but the outcome of an individual case of sexual abuse in sports can also depend on race or the culture in which it takes place. It has been found that women of color are faced with a unique set of cultural norms and challenges that make it more difficult for them to recognize what sexual abuse is when it occurs, resist habits of self-blame, and to come forth without fear of judgment or rejection from family or peers. In a study reported on by the University of South Carolina, it was found in a sample of college females that the highest rates of sexual abuse and rape occurred among the Hispanic and African American females. When applied to women's sports, these factors of race, ethnicity, and culture can influence the characteristics of each individual case of sexual abuse. Similarly, socioeconomic status can influence how an individual case of sexual abuse is handled. The potential to lose opportunities, jobs, and reputation are the costly consequences that low-income individuals face if they decide to speak out about the abuse. The Vice President for Workplace Justice at the National Women's Law Center revealed to The Atlantic magazine that a lot of low-income women can rarely afford lawyers, and they're also undereducated about their options to report sexual misconduct. This may be related to why low-income women tend to keep quiet about sexual abuse in sports or places of work. One positive outcome of the famous sex abuse cases surrounding the USA Women's Gymnastics team was the development of an important sports safety organization called Safe Sport. Safe Sport enforces policies and protocols aimed to protect young athletes from abuse or misconduct, and it provides athletes with a safe resource to which they can report abuse. It also provides all personnel with educational resources regarding what constitutes abuse, how to identify abuse, and what measures need to be followed if abuse occurs. This issue affects so many people, including myself as I participate in sports. I race motocross, which is a male-dominated sport, so of course I have experienced plenty of sexual harassment from people both in person and online. Thankfully, it hasn't deterred me from continuing to ride. It's so unfortunate to know that so many female athletes experience the same uncomfortable feeling I've felt, for many of them even worse. It's a step in the right direction for this issue to have been identified and addressed through organizations like Safe Sport and movements like Me Too. I hope to continue to see improvements in this issue of women's sports. Thanks so much for listening.